Ibrahim Traoré thought it was just another quiet afternoon at McDonald's until a 5-year-old boy walked up to him and whispered something that silenced the entire room. What he said shocked everyone and started a moment the whole world would soon be talking about. This is not about politics. It is not about power. It is about one sentence that carried the weight of a nation. The air inside the McDonald's was calm, almost sleepy. It was the kind of afternoon when the rush had already passed and the place was filled with quiet chatter, the occasional clatter of trays, and the laughter of a few children playing near the play area. No one paid much attention when a tall man in a simple dark hoodie and jeans walked in and ordered a coffee with fries. He did not come with any security, no fanfare, just a man looking for a short break from something heavier than anyone else in the room could imagine. Ibrahim Traoré found a seat by the window, away from most of the crowd. He placed his tray down gently, eyes scanning the room without meaning to. Habits do not go away easily when you have lived in conflict zones and carried the weight of a nation. But for now, he looked just like any other tired man trying to enjoy a moment of silence. Across the room, at a table with a red balloon tied to a chair, sat a small boy with messy curls and big, round eyes. He could not have been older than 5. He was holding a half-eaten Happy Meal in one hand, the toy in the other, but his eyes were fixed on Ibrahim. It wasn't fear or excitement, but something deeper, like recognition. The boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed. The mother, a woman in her early 30s with deep-set eyes and tired shoulders, leaned down as the boy whispered something into her ear. Her eyes immediately turned toward Ibrahim. At first, she froze. Then she shook her head slightly, but the boy insisted, pulling her arm again, more firm this time. The mother looked hesitant, unsure whether to allow her son to go. After a pause that felt longer than it was, she nodded. The boy slid off his chair slowly, holding his toy tightly in one hand. He walked across the tiled floor in his socks, tiny footsteps echoing just enough to catch the attention of a few nearby tables. He stopped right beside Ibrahim, who was sipping his coffee without looking up. The boy stood there for a moment. Then he took a breath and leaned in. What he whispered into Ibrahim's ear made the man freeze. His hand, holding a fry, stopped mid-air. His eyes widened, not in fear, not in confusion, but something else. Something that no one around him could understand just yet. A few people noticed the moment. A family 2 tables away lowered their voices. An elderly man near the back leaned forward. The mother stood still, waiting. Ibrahim slowly turned to the boy, looking at him like he had just heard something from a dream, something impossible to hear in a place like this. He placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder, his expression soft, but shaken. And then, the restaurant went silent. The silence in the McDonald's felt unnatural. Conversations had faded into whispers. Fryers still hissed in the kitchen, but no one seemed to hear them anymore. All eyes were on the boy and the man, 2 unlikely figures sharing a moment no one could quite understand. The boy stood still, as if waiting for something. Ibrahim looked at him for a few seconds longer, then slowly leaned back in his chair, processing the words still echoing in his mind. His hand was still on the child's shoulder, but his gaze had shifted to the floor, as if searching for a memory buried deep inside. Then he spoke, not to the boy, not to anyone in particular, but softly, like speaking to himself. "Say it again," he said, his voice almost a whisper. The boy took a small step closer and repeated it, just a little louder this time. "Thank you for protecting my grandma in Africa. She says you're the reason she's alive. That makes you a hero." Ibrahim closed his eyes for a second. The weight of those words hit harder than any speech he had given, any battlefield he had walked, or any pressure he had faced as a leader. There was something about hearing it from a child, so innocent, so clear, so sure, that made it all real in a different way. A chair scraped against the floor as someone stood up from a nearby table. "What did he say?" a woman asked, her voice breaking the quiet tension in the room. Others looked at her, grateful she had asked what they all wanted to know. Ibrahim turned slowly, his expression calm, but his eyes still holding something heavy. He looked at the boy again, then back at the crowd that was now fully watching. Mothers with their kids, teenagers with phones half raised, a man in a business suit near the door who had stopped mid-step. Even the workers behind the counter had paused. He cleared his throat gently and asked the boy, "Can I tell them?" The boy nodded without a word. Ibrahim stood up, and though he spoke gently, every word felt like it landed with weight. He whispered. Ibrahim said, pausing for a moment, "Thank you for protecting my grandma in Africa. She says you are a real hero." You could hear a fork drop after that. The moment held like a string pulled tight. No one clapped right away. No one cheered. They just looked at him, then at the boy, trying to understand the full meaning. And then, slowly, a woman near the back began to clap. Quiet, respectful. Another person joined, then another. It was not loud, it was not dramatic, but it was real. The kind of quiet applause that felt like a thank you, not just for Ibrahim, but for something much deeper, like hope, like sacrifice. A young man at the counter wiped his eyes. An older woman nodded softly to herself. And the boy? He just smiled, like he had done the one thing he came there to do. Ibrahim sat back down, still holding the boy's hand. The food on his tray was cold now, forgotten. But something far more important had just been served. The moment hung in the air, and no one wanted to be the first to look away. The quiet clapping slowly faded, but the energy in the room had changed. It was no longer just a fast food place. It felt like something sacred had passed through it, something none of them came for, but none of them would forget. People leaned closer to one another, whispering, trying to piece it all together. A teenage girl near the window opened her phone, recording without even realizing it. A man in a blue jacket asked his wife, "Did he say grandma? In Africa?" And she nodded, eyes still fixed on Ibrahim. A woman in her 40s, holding a tray with untouched coffee, stepped forward. She was the same one who had asked the question earlier. Her voice was careful, respectful. "Was she really your grandmother, the boy's grandma?" Ibrahim looked at her, his face calm but still emotional. He shook his head slowly and pointed gently at the boy. "Not mine," he said. "Number. But I know who she is." Now everyone was paying attention, not out of curiosity alone, but out of something deeper, respect perhaps, or the need to understand something human in a world that often forgets what humanity feels like. The boy's mother stepped forward now, unsure whether to speak. Ibrahim looked at her and nodded with quiet encouragement. She took a breath. "We came from Burkina Faso, 6 months ago." Her accent was soft, but her voice was steady. "My mother stayed behind. She cannot travel. But she always told us about a man who changed things, who made her village safe again." She looked at Ibrahim, something like disbelief still in her eyes. "She never told us his name, only that he wore no crown, but carried more honor than any king." Ibrahim's lips pressed into a thin line. He looked away for a second, eyes blinking faster than usual. "She would always say, 'If you ever see him, tell him I lived because of him. Tell him, thank you.'" Now people really began to feel the weight of what was unfolding in front of them. This was no publicity stunt. There were no cameras when the boy first walked up. There was no performance in his voice, just a child delivering a message, and a leader hearing something his position could never prepare him for. An older man sitting 2 tables away stood up, placing his hand on his chest. "You do not hear these things on the news," he said. "All we get are headlines. But this is the truth." A few people nodded. Some wiped their eyes. One young woman in the corner typed something on her phone and hit post without even reviewing it. A kid just thanked Ibrahim Traoré in a McDonald's for saving his grandma in Africa. "I'm crying. Humanity still exists." Ibrahim looked around and gently pulled the boy close, then glanced at the mother. "Come, sit with me." She hesitated, but he pulled out 2 chairs from his table, and just like that, they joined him, not as strangers, but as something else now. A quiet bond had formed, and the rest of the restaurant, they watched with a strange mix of awe and stillness. No one interrupted. No one tried to take over the moment, because deep down, they knew they were watching something rare, something real. They sat together, 3 people at a table meant for strangers, now joined by something deeper than coincidence. Ibrahim's tray of cold fries and half-finished drink remained untouched. He was full, not with food, but with something heavier than hunger. His eyes stayed on the boy for a moment longer before turning to the mother, whose hands trembled slightly as she held a paper napkin. "What is your mother's name?" he asked softly. "Asetu," she replied, her voice tightening. "She is from a village near Jibo, north." Ibrahim nodded slowly. The name struck something familiar. He leaned back, letting his thoughts travel back in time. Dust-covered roads, late-night briefings, names of villages marked in red on wrinkled maps. He remembered a small community attacked twice in 1 week. He remembered staying back longer than he was supposed to, not just to push the enemy out, but to rebuild a school, to help dig a well, to make sure the old women could sleep at night without fear. "Your mother wore a red scarf," he said suddenly, like the memory had just unlocked. The woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Yes, always." Ibrahim's eyes softened. "She made me tea after a long day. She said it was the only thing that quieted the storms in her mind." Now even the people sitting nearby, those who had stayed quiet until now, were leaning in. One man stopped mid-bite. A group of teenagers had put their phones down, listening with eyes wide, no longer needing a screen to feel connected. The boy watched Ibrahim with a strange calm. Not excitement, not confusion, just quiet trust. Like he already knew this story was real, even if he could not understand all of it yet. "My mother said you were the only one who stayed, when everyone else had already given up, that you gave your jacket to a crying girl, that you told them fear only grows where hope is missing." Ibrahim blinked once, then twice. "I forgot I said that." The woman smiled softly. She did not. There was a pause, a long one. No one in the restaurant wanted to break it. It was the kind of silence that only comes when something holy is happening, when truth is being passed from one heart to another without needing to be shouted. The boy broke the silence with the simplicity only a child could carry. "Can I draw you?" the boy asked, pulling a crayon from his pocket. Ibrahim laughed softly. "You brought crayons to McDonald's?" The boy shrugged. "In case I met someone important." The laughter that followed was gentle and warm. It broke the tension without breaking the moment. Ibrahim reached into his coat and pulled out a pen. He handed it to the boy. "Then you draw, and I will sign it after." The boy got to work right there on a napkin. People around began to relax, smiling, whispering, pointing, but still watching. A few took out phones, not to post, just to capture something that felt too rare to explain. Ibrahim looked around, seeing the faces now glowing not with curiosity, but with something else. Maybe it was gratitude, maybe admiration, or maybe just relief, that in a world so heavy, someone had reminded them of something light. One man stood and approached the table. He looked older, gray in the beard, with kind but tired eyes. "I never cared for politics," he said quietly, "but today, I saw a man." Ibrahim met his gaze and offered a respectful nod. "Sometimes that is all we need to be." The man placed his hand on Ibrahim's shoulder, squeezed once, and left. No photo, no words after that. Just one man passing through, touched by something he had not expected. As the boy continued to draw and his mother watched in awe, Ibrahim stayed still, letting the moment breathe, knowing that sometimes the loudest voices come from the smallest mouths. And this one, whispered by a 5-year-old in a fast food chain, was still echoing across every heart in the room. The boy finished his drawing. It was rough, colorful, and childlike, but the figure was clear, a tall man with a kind face, standing next to a small stick-figure boy holding a flag. Ibrahim looked at it and smiled. "You made me taller than I am," he said with a quiet laugh. The boy grinned. "Because you look big when you help people." Ibrahim took the pen he had given the boy and gently signed the bottom corner of the napkin. "To your grandma," he wrote, "with honor and peace." A teenager at the next table, who had been filming silently, uploaded a 40-second clip of the drawing moment with a simple caption. This 5-year-old walked up to Ibrahim Traoré in McDonald's. What he said next made the whole place stop. Real leadership, no cameras, no speeches, just the truth. Within minutes, it started spreading. By the time the family left the restaurant, the video had already reached thousands. Within an hour, it hit national headlines. No interviews, no campaign, just one child's voice. News anchors debated whether the moment was real, but the footage was raw. No edits, no filters, just shaky hands and real expressions. Headlines popped up. The whisper heard across continents. A boy, a leader, a moment that changed the narrative. From a village in Africa to a fast food chain in America, a story of heart. By evening, Ibrahim was trending, not as a politician or military leader, but as a man who listened. The napkin drawing was framed by the boy's mother and posted on her private account. Within 24 hours, it was shared by major news outlets. Not because of the art, but because of the caption she had added. He didn't make a speech. He just listened. And that made my son feel seen. In a speech a week later at a global summit, Ibrahim briefly paused mid-sentence. Cameras were rolling, leaders watching. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded napkin, and unfolded it carefully on the podium. He let the silence stretch before he spoke. A child once whispered something in my ear, he said. He said, "Thank you for protecting my grandma in Africa. She says you are a real hero." I did not know that a sentence so small could remind me of everything I had forgotten about leadership. He paused again, not for effect, but because he was holding back emotion. Then added, "Sometimes the loudest voice in the room does not come from a microphone. It comes from someone who barely reaches your waist." The world did not forget the story, not because of political weight, but because of the purity of the moment. No press release could have written that whisper. No publicist could have scripted the reaction. It became more than a story. It became a symbol of what leadership should feel like. In classrooms, teachers played the clip during discussions on empathy. In offices, managers shared it during talks on leadership. On social media, people began ending their posts with the same phrase. One whisper can remind you why you lead. And in that McDonald's, now months later, there's still a quiet photo on the wall. Two people sitting at a table, a leader and a boy with crayons. No plaque, no explanation. Just a printed sentence underneath. The smallest voices carry the biggest truths. Ibrahim Traoré did not walk into that restaurant to inspire a nation, but one child, one sentence, and one act of real connection sparked a moment that the whole world could feel. If this story touched you, share it. Not for clicks, but for the truth it carries. Because the smallest voices really do carry the biggest truths.